In a peaceful Tuesday morning, Robert Bobby King pushed open the doors Summit Rich National Bank's revolving doors with the calm of someone who has faced things further harder than bureaucracy. He dressed a well-ironed white shirt, although the fists they betrayed the years of use. About his head, one cap black embroidered with the words Korea and Vietnam veteran concealed his hair thin and white. In his right hand, he held a small leather wallet where kept his identification, a couple of old checks, and among them, a round coin of worn metal. It was not just any coin, it was a challenge coin, given only to those who had filled missions, classifieds. Bobby didn't come searching tributes, neither charity. I just wanted withdraw some hundreds of dollars of the account forgotten, opened decades back with his combat pay, money that had decided to use to help his grandson to pay tuition university. But when he reached the counter, he noticed that the atmosphere was not welcoming. The young woman cashier, with nails newly graffiti and expression haughty, frowned upon seeing his ID worn out. The manager, a man of about 40 years with such a polished smile as if false, she approached quickly. "Is it sure that this account, does it exist, sir?" he asked in a tone that pretended courtesy. Bobby nodded serenely. "Yes, young man. This account was opened before you was born." There was giggles. The manager leafed through the documents with disdain and called security. "He doesn't appear in his system, Mr. King. We'll need you to step aside." Bobby didn't argue. He pocketed his wallet, but let about he counter that coin. Then he went to a chair by the window and sat with his back straight, like who has learned that there are humiliations that are only responded to with silence. If you have ever seen a similar injustice, and it happened to you, he heart this moment, subscribe. It's the only way we can keep telling these stories. When the currency about he counter did not attract the attention of the youth's employees. But for one person in particular, it was like a shot amidst the silence. Maya Rodriguez, a defense contractor and former military officer, he was in line, waiting his turn with some documents in hand. Seeing he flash metallic, his eyes opened slightly. He acknowledged he design engraving, an emblem former Special Operations Command. It wasn't just a medal, commemorative, that was only awarded to soldiers who had participated in missions classified, often denied even by the own governments. Maya stepped back, looked at the old man sitting by the window, and knew that this man was not a fraud. He was someone who had vivid things that most couldn't imagine. He took out his cell phone and dialed a number reserved, one that was not used from toward years. To the other, on the side of the bank, an older employee with grey hair and glasses thick, also observed in silence. His name was Mr. Dalka, and he was more than 30 years in the institution. When listening, he named Robert King among the manager's murmurs. Something ignited in his memory. He slowly rose from his desk and walked toward a side wall where hung photos old from the bank's founding. There, under glass dusty, an image showed several men with helmets and plans in the hand. In the center, a young man strong, with a look determined and uniform military. Under the photo, Colonel Robert J. King, Infrastructure Coordinator, 1972. Dalka swallowed. He turned toward her manager, who still, he smiled mockingly, and said in a voice firm, "That man helped build this bank when you neither not even knew tie up the shoes." Dalka's comment did not more than bothering the manager, who responded with a smile tense. "Well, yes, helped build it. He should know that without identification, valid cannot be withdraw money," he said, trying keep control. Maya, meanwhile, had left the bank and spoke by phone in the parking lot. His words were direct and dry. "I have a veteran with a level currency classified in a bank that you don't recognize his identity. His name is Robert King. Requires validation, urgent." The other's voice side did not ask details. He only replied, 10 minutes. Maya returned to he came in, stood next to Bobby and spoke to him. In low voice, "Mr. King, the I respect comes in way." He looked at her with a mild smile. "Without Surprise, like yeah, already knew that he time sometimes gives back what it gives you. Removed. This scene move you, like and share it with someone who needs to recover faith in he I respect. Exactly 11 minutes. Then, a black convoy stopped in front of the bank. From one of the vehicles descended General Everett Kane, decorated with multiple awards, stars, and current chief of operations for 4 districts military. Their presence full he place as a silent wave. He didn't ask manager, he didn't ask permission. He walked firmly up to Bobby King, stood at attention in front of him, and greeted with a precision military man who froze the atmosphere. "Colonel King," he said in a deep voice, "it is an honor to meet you again." The murmur among the customers and employees suddenly disappeared. The manager drank dry. Maya remained firm, while Dalka watched with moist eyes. Kane continued, "This man served in 2 wars. He was in 6 theaters of operations and participated in 14 missions classified, some of which neither not even I have permission to read." The silence that followed was not one of embarrassment. It was one of astonishment. The general turned around toward a manager who had started to go backwards without knowing exactly what to do. Kane did not raise his voice, but every word of his cut the air as a high-ranking order. "You called it fraud. Did you expel him from a place that he helped lift while you played with debit cards?" The manager tried babble or excuse, but Kane lifted a hand. "Silence. It's not you. I came to listen." Then he turned toward Bobby and added respectfully, "Colonel, if you'll allow me, I'm going to stay with you until this is resolved." Bobby's face was still serene, without traces of ego or revenge. He just nodded gently. In his eyes, all that fuss wasn't necessary. He knew who he was, and that was enough for him. The check was unlocked in a matter of minutes. The system, curiously, seemed to have further information of which the manager there was darling admit. The balance was intact. Bobby withdrew exactly $850 in cash. Maya, who watched from the side, he asked kindly, needed escort or assistance to return home. "No, thank you," he said. This money is to help my grandson with college. He wants to study history. It seems that something rubbed off on him from his grandfather." He smiled by first time, and that smile disarmed everyone. General Kane opened a small black velvet box that had brought with me. Inside, a medal recorded with the name of Robert J. King and 3 words, "Service further beyond the history." Bobby took it with both hands, looked at it some seconds, and then said in a soft tone, "I didn't do missing, but thanks for remember." A silence strange, full of respect, filled the bench while Bobby was putting away the medal in the inside pocket of his shirt. No one spoke again for a good while. Some customers, they stopped typing on their phones. Others, they looked down, ashamed for not having intervened. Even the cashier, who had it looked at with suspicion, now remained still, like, I had just seen one living legend pass in front to she. It was then when a mother with her son, little one, approached timidly to Bobby. The boy, no more than 7 years, raised his hand in sign of greeting. "Thank you for take care of us, sir. My grandfather was a soldier too." Bobby bowed his head and shook his hand warmly. There was no speech nor flag, only humanity. As Bobby stood up to leave, General Kane offered him his arm by courtesy, but he rejected it with a smile. "I'm still holding up fine," he joked. He walked towards the exit with firm steps, leaving behind it a silence reverent. It was then when, spontaneously, dozens of people in the bank stood up. Some were veterans. Their caps or badges gave them away hanging around the neck. Others, simple citizens. Nobody said one word, but all they greeted in silence as Bobby walked through the doors. It wasn't a tribute prepared, nor a ceremony military. It was something deeper, an act of honor, a sudden awareness of what it means really serve. Outside, the sun shone brightly. Bobby looked up at a sky. He breathed deep and murmured, "This time, they saw me." Then he climbed onto the old man's sedan that still preserved since he returned from abroad, and started without haste, like who does not need run away from nothing. The news was not long in coming in spread. Someone there was recorded part of the moment with his cell phone, the general's greeting, the coin about he counter, the words, Colonel King. The video went viral in a matter of hours, not because of the spectacular nature of the event, but for dignity silent of the protagonist. In a country saturated with scandals and controversies, seeing an older man being recognized without asking for anything was touching, a fiber asleep in millions of people. On social media, veterans shared photos of their own coins, thanking Bobby for reminding them that their history still mattered. In the news, some journalists, they talked about him as the soldier who did not ask, sorry by exist. The bank, for his part, released a statement warm where he spoke of a misunderstanding and a review of protocols. No one believed him. In the following days, the bank received letters, flowers, and even visits from people who just wanted to see the chair by the window where Bobby had been sitting. Some were taking photos. Others, they just stayed in silence some minutes, and then they left. It was then when Mr. Dalka, the senior employee, proposed an idea to the directory: place a plate in honor of Bobby. Not as act of relations public, but as justice poetic. The proposal was approved quickly, unusual. And so, a week after, under the main sign of the bank appeared a line new, recorded in steel-polished Robert J. King, Colonel Honor in silence. There was no ceremony. He just showed up at tomorrow, like always had state there. And for whom they knew the story, that was enough. Because sometimes remembering isn't about applauding, it's about never returning to forget. One afternoon, Maya Rodriguez returned to the bank, this time without uniform, neither documents. I just wanted to see the license plate. He stopped, forehead to she in silence, and closed the eyes of some seconds. He remembered so many others like Bobby, who came back from the front and went forgotten by a system that the sent. He thought in his father, among his companions fallen, in those who follow struggling battles that don't come out in the news. When it opened eyes, he noticed an elderly couple was sitting nearby, also looking at the plaque. "Did you know him?" Maya asked. "No," the woman replied, "but we come all the Thursday to thank you. My grandson wants to be a soldier. We told him this history and now always wants to go through here." Maya smiled. Memory, she understood, is passed on by word of mouth, and while someone keeps it, nothing is ever completely lost. In a three-a-side cafeteria blocks from the bank, Bobby was with his grandson, Jeremy. They were sitting in a wooden table by the window, with 2 steaming coffees and a history book open between them. Jeremy spoke excited about his registration at the university, from his classes, from the heroes of those who were there learned. "But there's something I don't understand, Grandpa," he said, a young man. "Why don't we teach further about people like you?" Bobby shrugged. "Maybe because some heroes do not fit in the books." Jeremy looked at him proudly. I think right about you. I want you more people know what you did." Bobby patted him, his shoulder gently. "Do it, but not so that I'm admired. Do it so that no one forget what it means to serve without asking for anything in return. If you got here, it's because something inside you also wants this memory to never be lost. Subscribe to help us keep it alive." The next day, Jeremy started working in an essay for his history class contemporary, titled He Text, The Man Who Didn't Need Medals. He wrote about that Tuesday in the bank, on the coin left in a counter, on his silence that changed everything. He didn't use any grandiloquent words. He just described the facts as there was lived, with humility, with pride, and with some anger contained. When your teacher read it, asked permission to share it with the rest of the course. One of the students uploaded it to a veterans forum, and in a few days, the rehearsal there was route hundreds of classrooms in all the country. Bobby, upon learning of this, he shook his head with a half smile. "I just went to the bank," he said, "but inside, Then I felt that something had happened, straightened. A month after, the chairman of the bank's board visited Bobby personally. He was carrying a briefcase and a look of discomfort obvious. "Mr. King, we want offer you a sorry official, an act public recognition, and a fund with its name to award scholarships to young people veterans." Bobby heard him in silence. He waited for her to finish, then answered firmly, "I accept the scholarship. Nothing more. I don't want applause, nor plates golden, nor speeches fake. But yes can help to others as I. Then let's do it." The executive nodded, with a mixture of respect and relief. Sometimes, Bobby thought, you have to let the system fix what you broke, even if it's in small steps. And if that opened path to others veterans forgotten, then all he episode there would be, it was worth it. The King Fund began as a small internal initiative of the bank, but soon attracted the attention of organizations further large. In less than 3 months, they had granted 10 scholarships to young people who had served and returned without knowing how rebuild their lives. Bobby received letters, thanks, even invitations to events, all of which politely declined. For him, the medal that Kane had given him delivered was enough. He continued walking each morning to the cafeteria with Jeremy, checking with him tasks and listening to their doubts about a world. He unwittingly became a mentor to others young people who came to him searching a dress. It did not give long tips, just sharing pieces of your experience with it honesty with which he had served, and without planning it, it began to heal. In one of those meetings, a young named Tasha approached him. She had 23 years, sad eyes and uniform newly hanging. "Mr. King," he said, "how do you continue after seeing so much?" Bobby looked at her in silence, recognizing in his voice the weight that he same there was loaded during years. He offered her a seat, ordered 2 coffees, and responded with a history, not one lesson, not one solution magic, just one anecdote of an evening in Da Nang, where a child's laughter gave him back the reason to continue walking. Tasha heard in silence, without interrupting. When they finished, she stood up, more upright. "Thank you. You didn't give me an answer, but he gave me peace." And in those moments, Bobby understood that his presence continued having purpose, even in the calm. As the weeks passed, Bobby's story became more and more unstable, settling as part of the city's landscape. It was no longer a viral novelty, but a reference permanent. The people passing by the bank was going down a tone of voice when seeing the plaque. Some, they took their children to read it. The schools began to organize small visits, and the students they left grades handwritten next to the chair where Bobby had been sitting that day. Jeremy was collecting some of those letters and showed them to his grandfather on weekends. Bobby read them calmly, and although he rarely commented on something, her eyes shone in a different way. Once, she found among them a sheet of paper written in letters trembling, "Thank you for teach us that dignity is not lost with age." Bobby folded it carefully and put it between the pages of his book favorite. One Saturday, while fixed his little garden, Bobby received a visit unexpected. It was General Kane this time, without uniform, with clothes simple and one toolbox in hand. "I heard that this needs arrangements," he said, smiling. Bobby laughed. "You, General, nailing tables." Kane shrugged the shoulders. "We all serve in different ways, forms." They spent the afternoon working together, between memories, jokes, and silences, comfortable. When falling the sun, Kane stopped in front of the garden already repaired and said, "There is a thing that you don't said that day in the bank." Bobby looked at him. "What thing?" Kane replied, "That greeting wasn't just for your medals. It was because when I was a recruit lost, you were the first one who treated me as a human being. I never forgot that." Bobby didn't answer. He just gave her a slap in his shoulder and continued watering her plants. That night, Bobby sat in his armchair with a cup of tea and looked out the window. "I didn't think in medals, neither in tributes. I thought in the small ones things, in his grandson growing with values firm, in the young people who now they had a scholarship with his name, on the chair of that bench that had been turned symbol of something more big. Never imagined that a visit routine to the bank would end, generating all that. There was faced as any another day with dignity, without waiting nothing. And yet the world, or at least his little piece of him, there was decided look closer. He thought in his wife, in as there, would be laughed when he found out everything. Never raisins unnoticed, Bobby King would have saying she, and he there would be answered the same as always. I don't do noise, dear, I just walk. A few days later, Jeremy asked his grandfather to accompany him on a date, a chat in his university. The professor there was read he essay and wanted them students they will listen to the protagonist in person. Bobby hesitated. He didn't like them the spotlights nor the crowds, but seeing. The eyes of his grandson nodded. They arrived on campus, a late sunny. Bobby entered the auditorium with his veteran's cap, his clean shirt and his walk calm. He was greeted with applause spontaneous. For 40 minutes, he replied questions with simplicity. He did not speak as hero, but as a man who had lived, and that, paradoxically, made him still further heroic. When it was over, a young man approached him and said, "Thank you for reminding us that history is also written with silence." Bobby just smiled, like who knows that, in the end, everything falls in his place. After the talk, many young people approached to ask him questions, take photos, or simply shake his hand. Bobby listened to everyone patiently, but without being a center of attention. He responded with short sentences, with anecdotes loose, avoiding glory. That night, Jeremy confessed to him, "Grandpa, I feel further proud of you than of any one character that there is studied." Bobby looked at him, and for first time in a lot time, his eyes moistened. "Then already I fulfilled my mission," he replied in a low voice. For him, having left that seed in his grandson worth more than any recognition official, I knew that his history, passing from generation to generation in generation, was going to continue serving, still when he was no longer there. Because it wasn't about him, it was about what he represented. If this part made you feel something, comment. We want to know how many of you also have a silent hero at home. The bank, for his part, transformed that corner where Bobby had been refused in a small memory space. They placed a replica of the coin, protected in a glass cube, with a text simple. Respect is not demanded, it is honored. Some employees knew one stopped to read it, others ignored it, but the majority understood the weight of that symbol. The young woman cashier was transferred to other branch. Nobody knew exactly. It was for what happened or for personal decision, but from then, the treatment of the adults' older people changed. The guards. They were no longer limited to looking. They greeted, they offered help. Mr. Dalka was promoted, and with part of his new salary, he sent make a wooden bench with a plaque. Here sat a man who taught to see. It was simple, unadorned, just as Bobby would have, darling. In a brief interview he gave time later to a local reporter, Bobby said, something that became a catchphrase for many. We don't need to be reminded as heroes, only as people who fulfilled their duty, his duty when more was needed. That line, replicated in articles and social networks, it was even printed in t-shirts by students of history and veterans, movements. But Bobby didn't let himself be wrapped for the attention. He continued with his routine simple walks, garden, visits to the bank from time to time in Wen, and the weekly coffees with his grandson. To those who recognized him on the street, I returned them a smile friendly and said, "Thank you, but already I did my thing. Now it's your turn." One day, while reviewed some old letters in his desk, found a photograph ancient in black and white. He, with barely 20 years, in uniform complete, holding a letter in front of the camera with a smile juvenile. On the back, written in letters firm, he said, "When don't remember me anymore, at least know that I was there." Bobby held her for a while between his fingers, then placed it in a frame simple about his shelf. He said nothing, but as he left the room, he looked at the photo again with a slight assent, as who makes peace with his own past. Because although never sought to be a symbol of nothing, the time had passed in charge of converting his silence in memory collective, and that was more than any medal could pledge. As time went by, Bobby began to walk slower, not because disease, but because his body, like the soul, also understands when it's time to go down rhythm. Still so, never stopped going the Sundays at the coffee shop with Jeremy, although now it was him who drove. They used to talk about politics, history, life same, but there was one issue that always avoided: death. Bobby didn't fear it, but he didn't like it waste energy in something that would come by yes, alone. When I arrive, I want to be found in peace, not waiting, used to say. Jeremy listened to him respectfully, taking silent note of each phrase. And although in his interior feared losing him, he also understood that his grandfather had left already everything necessary to continue without him. One autumn morning, Bobby didn't go down for coffee. Jeremy got into his room and found it sitting in his armchair, with the veteran's cap about his chest and photography framed still in his lap. There was gone in silence, like there was lived. No scandals, no goodbyes, just the serenity of someone who has fulfilled his duty. The funeral was small, but full of people. Veterans from different states traveled to pay his respects. General Kane spoke briefly, his voice cracking. Jeremy read a fragment of the essay he had written years before. And in the end, when all began to leaving, a spontaneous line of young people formed in front of the grave. One by one, they left a currency metallic identical to yours. Some new, others worn out. It was not a tribute organized. It was the way of saying, "Do not we forget." In the months that followed, the bank opened officially the Robert J. King Veterans Scholarship Young People, with a ceremony sober and without great speeches, such as he there would be dear. Jeremy was invited to speak, and although his voice trembled at the beginning, found forces in the memories. My grandfather was not a man of many words, but every what he did with a clarity that does not leave doubts. He taught us that the respect is not demanded by shouting, but by consistency. At the end, the public. He applauded standing up, not because protocol, but because, like Bobby, they understood that there are gestures that cannot be ignored. The scholarship began to change lives, and with each application accepted, with each history new that was born from that help, Bobby continued serving, still after his departure. Sometime later, Jeremy was walking by the bank one late anyone. It happened for the chair by the window, for the steel plate and for the coin inside the glass cube. He paused for a moment, saying nothing. He was accompanied a little girl small, her daughter, hair curly and smile shy. "Is that your grandfather?" she asked, she pointing at the plaque. Jeremy nodded. "Yes, my love. He changed many things without raising your voice." The girl looked at him curiously. "And can I too change things?" Jeremy bent and down, looked her in the eyes and answered, "Of course, you just need two things: to know who you are, and never have afraid of staying in silence when all they shout." The girl smiled, and together they left the bank, while Bobby's name followed there, engraved not only on the plate, but in the way that one place was breathing. With the years, Bobby King's story went from being a local anecdote to form part of the curriculum in academies, military and universities, not as case study, but as example of leadership silent, of integrity unbreakable. In documentaries, his image appeared fleeting, always with that cap black and serene eyes. But more beyond the files was in conversations every day where Bobby really lived in. Each young man who refused to give up, in each employee who treated a stranger with dignity, each grandson who listened attentively to his grandfather. His legacy was not measured in statues, neither busts, but in gestures replicated daily by who they learned with their example that greatness does not need scenery. And so each time someone enters through the doors of Summit Ridge National Bank, you don't just see a steel plate or a currency protected after crystal. See a story that could have been lost, a truth that was almost ignored, but thanks to the character of one man, it became in the lighthouse. Because in the end, it wasn't the general, nor the bank, nor social networks what gave Bobby back his place. It was his silence, his firmness, his decision not to leave that bench like a loser, and that, more than any medal, that's what made him eternal. In the time of screams, Bobby King taught that sometimes it is enough to stay sitting down and let the truth speak by yes alone. And if the story moved you like it did us, subscribe to the channel. It's the only way to continue giving a voice to those who deserve to be remembered.